Yes, we will be live today and we will talk about the impeachment and Bitcoin. Okay. Now we're live now. Right. Good afternoon. We'll give it a minute to let people sign on. Good afternoon. Mary, how are you? Okay, good to be back. I hope everyone had a great weekend. A lot of news over the weekend, a lot of stuff to talk about. But I also, so often we just talk about headlines. And my goal when I started this podcast wasn't just that it be headlines, but also be topics that are informative going forward for a lot of people who may not follow the ins and outs of politics or economics or finance. And so today, one of the topics that I have on the agenda, if we get to it, obviously I've missed many topics that we planned on talking about before, but is Bitcoin. I know it's something not many people know much about, but it's something that may play a massive role in economics and worldwide finance going forward. And so some things happened last week. So we'll talk a little bit about what that is, what happened last week that will change the course of some of our financial institutions moving forward. But since it's Monday, we could talk about the weekend a little bit. Some things that people ask me about all the time. I know I focus on the last year on losing weight, and that's been phenomenal, a great experience for me. I'm one of the few people I think that actually lost weight during COVID, so I was happy to do that. But I need to kind of kick it up again. So I'm starting tomorrow. If anybody has experience with this, a place called Orange Theory in Guilford. So I'm doing my first class there tomorrow. So tomorrow at 4:00, if I come on live, but I look like I'm about to pass out, it might be because it's hangover from that noon appointment that I have in Guilford. So I'm trying something new. So far in the last year, I really focused on lifting weights. Now I want to get cardio in there. So I'm starting that tomorrow. Yesterday, by the way, we want to promote restaurants as well. So I went and tried out a restaurant in Brantford for lunch called Doma. It opened, I don't know, a month or two ago. And I tried it out about a month ago. And I will tell you, I was less than impressed. They had these brick oven pizza that was kind of burnt. Wasn't great. They did put honey on a pepperoni pizza, which was a nice touch, but wasn't blown away by any means. Wasn't bad, but wasn't blown away. Last night, I went to the same restaurant with a group of friends and for someone's birthday party. And holy God, good. Like really amazing food. I had swordfish, which was spectacular. Someone here had duck, which was just not duck. I'm sorry, a pork chop, which was unbelievable as well. So sometimes you got to try a place 2 or 3 times to really get a feel for it. But really can't recommend it enough. A spectacular dinner, great job. Went there twice. Didn't love the pizzas, but I'll tell you the dinners were spectacular. Absolutely check it out. It's right across from Brantford Jewelers in the town center. I also was at Rosso Vino last week, and I had never, you go to Italian restaurants and you usually order, pasta of some sort or something along those lines. And I had the duck at Rosso Vino, and that was spectacular. So we are actually getting a nice, in the last few years especially, we've always had, the Pasta Cozies of the world, and Cafe Fiore is a little bit notch below that from a price standpoint, but adding Doma, Rosso Vino in the last few years, really good selection of high quality Italian restaurants in Brantford. And that's good to have. So, and especially now, if you don't want to go out, do takeout, what have you, still support all these restaurants the best you can. They desperately need it. So it was a good weekend. I hope you all had a great weekend. And obviously there's been serious reactions on my social media pages, but also to calls and messages on the impeachment trial. I think everything that I've kind of said on the impeachment kind of remains true. The vote they picked up 7 Republicans to vote against Trump, to vote to find him guilty. We have to remember some things here. First of all, an impeachment trial is not a judicial trial in a court. The rules of the judiciary do not apply the same way. So this idea that Ted Cruz was walking into the back and talking to the legal team, what have you, doesn't really matter. It's irrelevant. We can yell about it. It's something to yell about, but doesn't really matter. I did spend some time on Friday or was it Friday, whatever after the vote was, watching CNBC's coverage and Fox News's coverage. And if you've never done this as an experiment, do it. It's spectacular to see how crazy our media is right now. Where MSNBC was just praising those seven and talking about what a travesty this was that he wasn't found guilty, and Fox News was like vindication, and this is a great thing. And it's amazing to go back and forth and see the talking heads sputter to their base. And this is the big, I'd say, misnomer when it comes to this idea on media, that media impacts everything so much. Yes, media has an impact, but those channels are catering to their base. And those bases are not enough to win elections. The top-rated shows on Fox or MSNBC are not getting 100 million views. They're not getting even 20 million views. It's much, much less than that. And so we have this rabid base. They're loud. They're all over social media. And they're watching the things that tickle their ears, no matter how false or ridiculous it may be. But that's not where elections are won and lost. Elections are won and lost are still won and lost in those large number of logical, reasonable middle. That includes, by the way, Democrats and Republicans. Large number of Democrats and Republicans are there because they registered that way early, but other issues have taken precedence in their life. And so the ideology is not a guiding force for them. Instead, they look at issues individually. And so whenever we see media reporting stuff that's kind of far left or far right, we can also have to ask ourselves, yes, it's crazy. One person said they were getting angry watching it, or they were getting mad, want to throw stuff at the TV. But a small number of people are watching that. It's not a huge number, and it's not enough to move elections. It just isn't. The numbers do not support that it's enough to move elections. At the same time, I put the same amount of credence as MSNBC and Fox News as I do in polling. So one of the polls that came out, and this is on Politico, was 58% of Americans believe Trump should have been convicted. And it's just, so I'm going to read a paragraph here. While 58% of Americans overall believe the former president should have been convicted, the polls split largely along party lines. 88% of Democrats believe Trump should have been convicted, while 64% of independents and just 14% of Republicans agree. The poll was conducted February 13th to 14th and sampled 547 adults through an online survey. So here's the question I have with that. Where the hell did you find 547 adults that actually watched the trial? They didn't. People answered the way they're supposed to answer. The Democrat would say yes, there was. The Republican say no, there wasn't. These polls don't mean anything anymore. They're headlines. They're great. They're wonderful to move the needle and get clicks. And God knows the media loves to put that headline up there. But you found 547 people over a weekend that watched the trial enough to know if that information was solid or not. The questions were actually more than that and far more detail. I'll read you some of the questions that came out that were asked here. Hold on one second. And you could do this often at the bottom of the articles if you link through. I'm sorry if I'm a little I have this sinus thing going on that just doesn't want to go away. So I apologize for my voice. Here's the questions. As you may know, Donald Trump was not convicted by the U.S. Senate in the impeachment trial this week. Do you think Donald Trump should have been or should not have been convicted in the Senate impeachment trial and barred from holding federal office in the future? Well, Democrats are going to say yes. Republicans are going to say no. There's nothing to see there. It's just a matter of how many people and what their ideology is. Regardless of the Senate's verdict, do you think the charges against Donald Trump were serious enough for him to be impeached and put on trial? Not serious enough for him to be impeached and put on trial? Same thing. These are questions that have, clear and obvious answers. When we have something of import, something that we feel matters, awards that matter, we don't do random polling. We don't do American Idol stuff. We find people who are experts in that field who analyze it and give their opinion. These polls are nonsense, but they're great for media. They're great for MSNBC. They're great for Fox News because they feed to their base. And we just see all weekend, we're seeing more and more of this. Here's the polling, here's the polling, here's the polling. Yeah, of course that's the polling. I could have told you that. It's not a question here. But from a political standpoint, we do have one key question remaining. It's the same question I asked last week, and it's the same question that remains. What was gained? If you're watching this now, And you went through this trial. Now, we knew before this trial began, there was no question who wasn't going to be found guilty. There was no way to get 17 Republican votes. They knew 5, maybe on a perfect world 10, would get some of those votes. We were never going to get to the 2/3 majority that you needed. What did you gain if you're a Democrat? And it's interesting, all the headlines afterwards were Biden can't wait to move on. Biden not said a word about this trial. Just move on. Let's get past this. The base now has, to feed into the Trump narrative that he's a victim, the base now has 2 impeachments and 2 acquittals. It helps him. Now, we don't know what that means. We don't know what Trump's going to do next. We know he has an ego bigger than anybody on the planet. And he now has 2 acquittals in his pocket. He pretty much controls the Republican Party because there are factions of the Republican Party in every single one of these states that these senators represent. So to a certain extent, there'll be some senators that say, I don't care. I'm just standing up for whatever I want to stand up for. Whatever Trump does, Trump does. But that may very well cost them a seat, or it may cost them a challenge from their own party. And sometimes when you get a challenge from your own party, a fraction forms in that party. So even in the general, a Republican who would go in typically as the front runner would fall behind. We've seen that in the past. We saw that with Hillary and Bernie Sanders, where many of the Bernie supporters said, no, I'm not even running. I'm not even voting. So you gave Trump an extra bullet. What did the Democrats gain? They catered to their base. There was that self-righteous crowd of, oh, we need to stand up for the right thing here. We need to do the right thing, and Republicans need to do the right thing. That's great. Don't tell me any Democrat wouldn't have done the same thing the other way around. But after all of that, all you did was embolden Trump's base. And we don't know what the next move is. We don't know when Trump gets going. Trump's biggest problem now is not having access to social media. It's gone. He's banned. So at the end of the day, this may not be the negative thing that we think it may be, but it certainly doesn't help Democrats. And so we go back to, and I still go back to why I admired Obama so much. There was so much pressure on Obama to go after Bush, to go after Cheney, and I hated Cheney. And I still put, I'll have this conversation with quite a few people who was worse, Trump or I'm a registered Democrat. I'm not a Trump fan by any means, but I certainly wasn't a Bush fan because of starting wars. And we can't go after Trump for that. But at the end of the day, I don't see what Democrats gained throughout this. And I understand why Biden wants to move on, get past this. Nothing was gained here. And so, yes, there are many Democrats that were on this podcast and my feed and my message boards, what have you, that said, no, we had to fight for this and we have to get a conviction and we have to stand up for what's right. Yes, what happened was wrong and despicable. And there is no question really in anyone's mind that Trump was significantly responsible for it. And even if you take away what happened before the attack, okay, maybe in his speech he never said, go kill Pelosi. That's true. But it's what happened after. Once the attack started, one person in this country, the most powerful person in the country, had the ability to end it. One person. Steve is a racist. So somebody just commented I'm a racist. Okay, that's good to know. In any event, he had every opportunity to end it. What we learned in the trial was Republicans, significant Trump supporters, were saying, please step up, please end this, please say something, and he didn't. The accounts from the Washington Post were that he was essentially gleeful at that time and couldn't understand why other people, other staffers, weren't just as happy. There's no question about guilt. For a president to take away everything from before, for that to be happening, an attack on the Capitol, the president to have the ability to stop it, for his supporters and family members to tell him, you have the ability to stop it, and not do so, is criminal. No question. He chose not to, and people died. That said, we may have been better suited walking away from this, moving past it, and giving that group, that base, a second bullet in that they came after us twice. And twice we got they would not convict. He was innocent. In any event, that's the impeachment, and it's done. It's over with. Biden wants to move on, and really so do I. There's nothing to gain by dwelling on that. The other topic I wanted to talk about that has come up in some conversations in the news last week, and will be a bigger topic over the next, I think this year, over the next 2 or 3 years, are things like Bitcoin. Now, most people don't know what Bitcoin is. So I'll describe what it is and then how it can possibly impact us moving forward, especially with financial institutions. And you may have seen the headlines last week that Elon Musk and Tesla purchased $1.5 billion in Bitcoin, and you can actually purchase a Tesla using Bitcoin. And over the weekend, some major banks who had fought it for a long time, are starting to talk about accepting it and taking a position in it moving forward. So Bitcoin is what is called so just go back to the comments here. Michael, hopefully the other investigations will take care of Trump like Capone and OJ. Almost certainly the New York discussion on his taxes is going to be significant. That will keep him in the news, but that will be more likely to take him down due to that. Same as Capone. Brian, what is your problem, kid? Steve, you know nothing about BTC. Do not fuck over the country more than you have the shoreline, please. What is your problem? Why do people have to, you want to make yourself a star or something, go somewhere else. We have these crazy people that are just nuts. Hold on one second. Let's see who this kid is. Brian Coppola is a kid. Dude, you're like a little kid. Oh, come on, man. You're starting off at this age? Oh. Wow. Well, if you'd like to come and have an adult conversation, you're welcome to give some input. And I welcome young kids to come on here, but come on. Tell us about Bitcoin. You can. You can engage in the conversation. I'm okay with that. Not a kid. You're 21. You're a kid, man. That's fine, though. Say something of value. If you're going to comment. That's okay. But something of value. Would I talk about the impeachment? You want to talk about Bitcoin? Let's talk about Bitcoin. Somebody just asked, do we have any update on other things in the town? Not yet. The festival and that sort of thing. I do not have an answer for you on that, Tom. I'm sorry. But this is why these conversations go. Now, most of the people watching this are a little bit older and a little more informed. Somebody coming on, running on Steve is a racist is kind of crazy, but whatever. That's fine. But add something of value to the conversation. You have the ability, your name is on screen now. You have the ability to earn the respect of people by saying something of value. I don't know who these other people are and people who have commented. I don't know Michael Lorello. I've never met you. Some other people here, I've met some I haven't, but they say things of consequence. They say something that makes you think. I don't know if they're left or right, Republican or Democrat, but if you are a young person, this idea that you can get your name on screen or something and you can be heard, use that as an opportunity to be heard for something good. Say something productive. If you know about Bitcoin, talk about Bitcoin. What are your thoughts on virtual currency? What are your thoughts on the track record of a blockchain and the ability and the benefits of that? Bitcoin is a virtual currency. That's all it is. It's pretty simple. And it's basically code that's on a computer. It could be on your cell phone. It could be on anything. But it has monetary value. There are some major concerns with it because initially when they first started, there was major concerns it could be used to fund terrorism. But it has one significant advantage, even over money, over cash. And that is there's something called a blockchain, which is a record of every single piece of Bitcoin that is bought and sold. So you may not be using your name, but you may have a code And there is a record kept in this blockchain every time a Bitcoin or a piece of a Bitcoin, a fraction of it, and we're going to buy a Bitcoin is worth about $50,000 now. So you can buy a soda at a store with Bitcoin, and it's a small fraction of an actual Bitcoin, but there's a record of that transaction. What that means is you're almost going to have no fraud, because almost like, look at it this way. When we want to verify a piece of art, right, something on a wall and it says it's a Da Vinci, we hire experts to go back and see, where has that art been? What is the chain of control? Who's owned it before? Or where was it stored? Who sold it to who? And you look at that background, and now you know, okay, if I get it back to a reputable art dealer, that there's some accuracy to it. It's not a fraud. Money, you can't do that. If I take out a $20 bill, you have no idea where that $20 bill has been. Bitcoin, I know where all that Bitcoin has been. I have that record. So there's not an actual coin. There is no actual, you may see pictures somewhere of actual coins. Those are basically like commemorative plaques. It's all digital. It's virtual currency. So there's no actual money. So this has become huge. And there are people who have become massive billionaires using Bitcoin. But there's there's also stories of, once you log into your account, you're only given a certain amount of time or a certain amount of chances to get the password correct. So there's people that are worried they may lose their money by not having that password. By being anonymous to a certain extent, there are disadvantages too. But you could have bought this stuff when it was nothing, next to nothing, and became a billionaire very quickly if you purchased it. And so the question for a long time was, do we take this for real? For example, the head of JP Morgan trashed it for a long time. And then in the last week or two kind of said, well, we might start thinking about bringing this on, because it is growing worldwide. And it has that massive advantage of, one, being global, no worrying about the dollar or the euro and all that stuff. Two, being secure from a fraud standpoint, having that blockchain, which is basically a log of where all of this money has gone, who bought it. And by the way, say who, it's just a number. It doesn't know your name. I wouldn't know, for example, Mary, if Mary Grandy purchased it, it would just be your code. So unless you said this code is me, I would not know who it is. So you can buy and sell things without your name being attached to it. And so it had done great. And then last week it was announced that Elon Musk and Tesla bought $1.5 billion. Now, companies sit on cash. To buy that much Bitcoin was instant validity to it. Where we're now taking the jump from, young kids, the typical nerds that bought this early on, that thought it was going to be the next big thing. Some very smart investors who got in early. But it's going from that to now major corporations are jumping in. And why this is going to be potentially a game changer is we're seeing in the last week or two major investment banks and major banks saying we may get involved as well. What does this mean? Does it mean in 20 years there's no money, we just use this? It's possible. We're using less and less cash now. But it could change the way we do business going forward. Eventually, this stuff runs out. There's a finite number of Bitcoins. Bob, so I should probably know this, but in the full faith and credit U.S. government backs the dollar, from what is the underlying value of Bitcoin derived? One is the security of it. It's a virtual currency. There is no gold to back it up. It is mined. So you can have a computer program which mines information, basically tracks the transaction, and a Bitcoin grows. Early on, it was much easier to do. Now it's much harder to do. There's a finite number of Bitcoin that will be produced. And to go into all the details will probably take longer than the podcast. But there is a finite number, and the security of it comes from having that blockchain, knowing how much is out there, and knowing where every Bitcoin or fraction of Bitcoin has been. It is listen, it took me forever to wrap my head around it. And the reason it's time that you have to start wrapping your head around it is banks are going to start buying in. You can buy things using Bitcoin. You know what? Let's do this search. What can I buy using Bitcoin. So I'll get it. OkCupid. You can get a subscription to a dating site. Cheap Air, which is a hotel booking agency. Pizza for Coins, a pizza delivery place. Etsy. Etsy takes Bitcoin now. This is kind of spectacular. Go through more of these. How to use Bitcoin for purchases. Yeah, there are places that take those are mainstream places. Etsy. I didn't realize that was the case. Now allowing that you can Overstock.com has their own blockchain, their own record. Those looking for basic retail goods can shop on Overstock.com, check out, and use the option to pay with Bitcoin. So it's a real thing. And the reason you need to start looking into it is because we're seeing major banks jump in. Elon Musk, who's basically been a game changer on everything, his buy-in last Sunday, when they announced that, it went up a ton. Actually, if you want to have some fun, I'll do this with you if you want to. Let's look at Bitcoin value over last 10 years. There's got to be a chart here somewhere. Bitcoin price history. We'll go down to 2012. So it was zero in October 2013, or it was 196.02. 196.02 in October of 2013. It hit 13,062 in 2017. Right now, it's over 50,000. $50,000. So in 2013, and many kids did this. It took $1,000 and bought 5 Bitcoins. If they have that now, it's worth $250,000. And so we're seeing major banks jump in. So it may be more information than I'm going to give you in 10 minutes here, but it is secure. The issue is it's largely anonymous. You're just a number. So if it's me or a terrorist, it's just a number. That's a concern. There are some safety measures in place, but that's a concern. Governments are jumping on board with watching this closely, but it's going to become mainstream. And so if that moves you to want to look more into it down the road, it's an investment. You can buy it and it goes up and down. It's just like any stock. At the same time, it may become part of our lives in the next 10 or 15 years. And so it's interesting to look at because you're going to hear it in the news more and more and more. It is something that is going to impact our future. I'm in my 40s. By the time I'm in my 50s, this will be certainly mainstream. And by the way, if you watch CNBC, watch any business news, there are whole portions of the news now on Bitcoin. So if nothing else, walk away with this realizing this is not going away. This is part of who we are. It is global. It allows commerce very quickly between America and Europe or Australia, also America and Afghanistan and Iraq and Iran and countries that terrorism may be a concern. So there's a bunch of questions there and there's a lot of concerns there, but it is worth taking a look at in a little more detail. It is going to be something we'll talk about more, and it will be something that will impact our lives going forward. So, okay, for now, we'll leave it there. It's worth looking into, by the way. Thanks for joining me today. I know it's a holiday. Some people asked if we're going to go live. There was no reason not to. And I have great internet today for some reason. So we will try to be live again tomorrow at 4 o'clock. If there are topics you want us to ask about, if there's something around town or the shoreline you want us to ask officials about, I'd be glad to. Something you want to ask to our state officials, Robin Comey, Christine Cohen, I'd be glad to do that as well. We'll also do our best. I know it's during the session to get one of them on this week and talk about what bills are talking about, what's going on in Hartford. What we're seeing a lot in Hartford is unions fighting back against Lamont right now. I'll tell you, it's hard for me to have a lot of sympathy for the unions right now. You know, they went through COVID and they got their paychecks and they had their benefits. You know, unions did not lose their jobs. And to come out of the gate while Lamont is trying, he's doing some mistakes. He's counting a lot on federal dollars. I don't know that they'll all come through, that sort of thing. But to almost immediately go crazy on him and saying, "How dare you not, give us our raises?" is, they're out for themselves. And it's easy for Democrats to count on those votes, but at the end of the day, the "we're all in this together" thing is out the window with this group. They don't care. While everybody else are losing their jobs, and business owners who are self-employed, who have all the pressure in the world on them, are struggling, we have unions saying, "I better get my 2.5% raise." That's not helpful. We'll talk about that more in more detail tomorrow. So, guys, thanks for joining me. I'll be back on tomorrow at 4 o'clock, and I hope you all have a great night.